各位同志早晨。
Good morning, members. We have attained the quorum and now call the meeting to order. This is the panel on welfare services. We're going to meet the deputations of 45 groups that will be joining us today on And Nothing People. And we'll save enough time for members to put questions to the administration. Item 1, support measures for low-income households not living in public housing and not receiving CSSA. The paper was prepared on the 9th of January, the same paper for the welfare panel. I'd like to invite the administration and the deputations to join us.
好，歡迎大家。
Welcome.
台上面有你嘅名。
Please look out for your name tag on the table. Our duty staff can assist if you can't find them.
呢度睇下張。俾嗰張。好啦，正式歡迎。
I'd like to welcome government officials to be with us. We have Deputy Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Head of Working Family and Student Financial Assistance Agency, PAS Home Affairs, CCF. Are the deputations making their way in? Just a reminder before we get started that your remarks will not enjoy any protection under the Powers and Privileges Ordinance, Cap 382, and nor would your submission be enjoying such protections. So please take note. Those in the gallery, please, we have the guidance notes for the members in the gallery for your information. Now for interpretation, just a reminder that 0 is for the floor, channel number 1 for Cantonese, channel number 2 for English, and channel number 3 for Putonghua. If you have any submissions to make available to us, please kindly do so after the meeting. All right, then, shall we invite the administration to brief us on the paper first? Chairman, we have already briefed members on the paper, and this is basically a background brief for members' information. I'd like to say that we spent quite a bit of time discussing the CCF initiatives. Perhaps Dr. Law might wish to supplement in this regard. We also spent time discussing the LIFA, and I've already told members that a review will be undertaken by the middle part of this year. At this point in time, we are conducting a questionnaire survey on those eligible, and also for those who are eligible but haven't quite put in the application. We'd like to find out why they haven't done so. There are views expressed by the deputations, and we are prepared to consider them all. Dr. Law, Chairman. I've got nothing else to supplement. At the HA panel, I've addressed some of members' questions. I'd like to repeat, however, that many members have different views regarding the CCF programs. Some of them feel that the CCF program should fulfill certain functions. I'd just like to repeat that the purpose of designing these programs is because we want to plug the gap, because the budget relief measures are not covering those who fall through the gap. And the CCF initiatives are there to plug these gaps. When the budget measures are improved or changed, we would think of other means to help these people. Now, for the one-off living subsidies, we will not repeat that again. Now, for the N-Nothing people, what are the measures do you have in mind to offer them assistance? Any measures that are in the pipeline? Dr. Law? In the past year or so, we have received comments in two areas. One is to help the subdivided unit tenants and offer them some rent assistance, in particular those who are on a waiting list for more than 3 years. And the other thing is to offer energy assistance for those who are living in subdivided units. Now, for rent assistance, I'm sure members are aware of the government's position in this regard. In the CCF, we will not duplicate or we would not do anything in contravention of government's policy. What the government doesn't want to do, we will not pick it up. The other thing about the energy subsidy is that for utilities like power and water bills, many of these problems stem from the owners overcharging the tenants. There may be problems if we offer subsidy in this kind of overcharging situation. We will be aggravating the overcharging, and the end result would be to subsidize the owners instead of the tenants themselves. So the effectiveness would be in doubt there. Now we have got all these suggestions on record, but for the SDU tenants, we haven't got any measures for the time being to help them. On the 9th of January, we did have some discussion on those issues at the welfare panel, and also the Deputy Secretary also attended the meeting at the Home Affairs panel. We have Mr. Lee for the first time today. Have you got anything to add? Mr. Aspen Lee, head of Working Family and Student Financial Affairs Assistant Agency. Well, let's get down to the public hearing. There are some deputations that are making their way up. First of all, I'd like to call upon Mr. Mack, Chairman. N-Nothing people should have, or they have the subsidies for them. In absence of any alternative, the government has done away with the subsidy. We feel very disappointed when the government doesn't heed the hardship of the people. According to the report, most of the applicants are living in subdivided units, and the rent that they're paying, the median level is 30 or 40% of their income, and this is a considerable burden. There are many women who are working in the chain stores. They're earning for $9,600 per month. It seems a lot of money, but if you take into account the education, the day-to-day expenses, they're living in hardship. Some grassroots women have to take care of their families, and they are doing odd jobs, and they do not fulfill the 144 hours threshold for the allowance. So this is very much a main source of income for them, and the rent is escalating. We urge the administration to bring back the allowance, and for the N-Nothing people, these rent assistance should become regularized, and this has to be adjusted according to inflation, and the income threshold should be relaxed so that nothing people will stand to benefit more. The long queue the rental housing means that many people have no alternative but live in the SDUs, and they have very low bargaining power. Many tenants do not enter into a written tenancy agreement, and there are situations where the owners are overcharging utilities bill, overcharging the rent. We feel that there should be a rent control. Now, rent control is to regulate the rent to a reasonable level to lessen the burden, and also tenancy protection should be implemented to protect the rights of the tenants. In the long run, there should be an increase in the supply of PRH so that the grassroots people don't have to bear the exorbitant rent and address all their housing issues. Thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Mack. Mr. Wong. Chairman, the CCF did launch one-off subsidy, living subsidy for the nothing people. Now this has come to an end. The FLU feels very disappointed. We urge the CCF to turn this into a regular program to benefit more people. I think there is a need for that. Over the past 3 years, the number of PRH tenants has been increased. And in every district, we have seen an increase. This shows that there are more and more poor people, poor families who will stand to benefit from this scheme. This scheme has been serving us well. This has gone down well among the public. Why don't you continue with it? The government is going to use LIFA to replace this. I don't think the two are serving the same purpose. They're not interchangeable. They may be serving the same targets, but LIFA will have longer working hours. This has been tested, and for those who don't have a steady job, they would be turned away. The government is substituting the CCF subsidy for substituting this for the CCF subsidy, and it is not good enough. We do have really hardship cases, and they are in very dire strait. Now, there was an applicant, Mr. Lee. He's 60-odd years old. He's got 2 kids. He's living in Prince Edward in an SDU. He's been waiting for the PRH for 4 years. Now, he got injured in a catering trade. He can stand for long hours, and all he could do would be to engage in part-time work with very unsteady income. He doesn't qualify for the LIFA. The only thing he would have would be the CCF one-off subsidy. He understands that this has come to an end, and this is leaving him very disappointed. These few $1,000s may be pittance for many people, but this is really a lot of money for Mr. Lee. He has to pay for the rent and the daily household expenses, education, schooling, and so on. The government doesn't want to offer any rent assistance to these people, and I think this is rubbing salt to the wounds.
So they're not a minority, particularly to the hundreds of thousands of applicants. There are more people in a worse situation. So if you all of a sudden take away the subsidy, that's really heartless. So our association thinks that the government decision is not reasonable, nor is that compassionate enough. I hope that you can regularize the provision and provide rent subsidy to ease the burden of low-income families. Well, you used the term that the policy just came to a halt out of the blue. Well, to the government, it said many times that there's a reason why the provision of the subsidy has to be stopped. Okay, next one is Ho Wei Lin. Thank you, Chairman. I'm from the Labour Party, community organizer, for the provision of relief measures for low-income households not living in public housing and not receiving CSSA. I think the government in supporting low-income families without CSSA, well, they are housed in household rental housing and also given subsidy for rents. But for the have-nots, the Community Care Fund has not offered any support to them. They explained that because the relief measures this year have been reduced and there's no rent allowance for public rental housing tenants. But let me give you an example to show that rent is a source of great pressure to them. Yesterday, I was doing a search, a 60 square feet flat on Hong Kong Island East. Monthly rent is 3,800. The minimum wage is 32.8 per hour for 8 hours a day, 31 days. It all come to a monthly income of 8,060. The rentals, together with other public facility expenses, already make up more than half of these people's monthly income. So the CCF's subsidy for and have-nots are intended to support them. The thresholds are not high, and many can apply. So people are asking whether LIVA can replace the role or replace the subsidy for and have-nots. I don't think so, because for the and have-nots subsidy, you have to have a family household of more than at least 2 people. And in the past, those who successfully applied for the and have-nots subsidy may not be eligible for LIVA. So even for the in-transport incentive subsidy, even if it's a one-person applicant, is just a monthly subsidy of 600 the most. Well, if you think that that can ease the pressure on rental, that can indeed also help make up for the expenditure in transportation. In 1998 and 2004, the government phased out the ordinance that offers protection to tenants. That put the tenants in weakened position when it comes to bargaining with the landlords. We know that it takes time to build public housing. Giving them public housing flats is the ultimate solution to them, to save them from being stuck in subdivided flats. But now they have no choice but to rent expensive subdivided flats. Labour Party thinks that now with the increasing rents and also with flat sizes getting smaller and smaller, you should really resume control over the ordinance helping tenants. Thank you. Now, Ms. Ng Ching. Thank you, Chairman. I believe that most people in Hong Kong on the provision of education, healthcare, transportation, and social welfare relief measures, they do welcome them. And we are also aware of the efforts made by the government. And for the and have-nots, the subsidy for them have been scrapped, replaced by LIVA. And this plan, since May 2016, has benefited about 30,000 households. That is a population of 100,000 or so. And the absence rule was removed last year to increase the number of eligible applicants. But figures show that the number of households benefiting compared to the government's plan of 200 households and 700,000 people actually is far below. The government also in 2017, that is mid of this year, there will be a overall review of the scheme. That's welcome news, but I hope that the government can at the same time be more in touch with the community. That is, it should consider carefully the actual situation of low-income families, to pay attention to optimizing working hours, lowering the requirements of working hours, and also use family units as the basis for calculations. And it should also review the subsidy for the income level to 60%. And for the applicants who only make about 50% or below, they should be given a one-off subsidy. And for families with special needs, for example, families with SCN children or disabled family members should be given special support. And the application procedure should be simplified. There could be apps or online platform that make it convenient for various groups and families to apply. And the successful applicants or those who have applied for tuition fee remission, full or half remission, they should be treated as eligible applicants for the subsidy already, so they don't have to reapply for the separate subsidy. And I also urge the administration within a time frame put more efforts into putting priority to low-income working families, because meal expenses, accommodation, and transportation subsidy are the kind of areas that should be given support by the government, so that people can live with dignity and feel the compassion from the government. Thank you. Thank you for concrete measures from you. Later on, I may ask Mr. Wong or Mr. Chen to respond. Next one is Mr. Yang Kim Pan. Good morning. I'm speaking on behalf of the overall platform in support of people living in subdivided flats. Well, there was an index released earlier on subdivided units, which really fully reflected in October 2015. We found that there have been a 13.6% increase in the rents of subdivided flats in comparison with composite consumer price A, which rose by 7.4%. It actually doubled that of the increase in the consumer price index. So the rental increase for subdivided flats is much higher than the average. If you look at the expenses for electricity and other bills, so the increase is even 2.1% more than the average household. With such a high increase in rentals for subdivided flat tenants, compared to June 2016, that is the rate for wage increase, average rate for wage increase, which is 3.4%, the wage increase can hardly catch up with the increase in subdivided flat rents. So particularly for rentals and electricity bills, you can see how big the pressure is on the tenants. In our association, we have members who are helping people who've just been given public rental housing. We found that because of the subdivided tenants who have long been living in expensive units, of course, it's welcome news for them to be given public housing, and yet they face the pressure of refurbishing their public housing and also to relocate themselves to the public housing. That's also a source of financial burden to them. So if the CCF can actually consider providing support, continuous support for these low-income households, that would be a great help to them. So if CCF for the and have nots, if it has plans for them, it must actually discuss it with stakeholders and other community groups as soon as possible. Besides subsidy for the and have nots, because the subdivided flat tenants have to wait so long for public rental housing, we agree that those tenants, those who have been living in the flats for more than 10 years, the government should find ways to offer them with the rental subsidy to help them support their current rents. Thank you. Next one, Mr. Siu Wai. Good morning. I'm from Kwun Tong, representing tenants there. Let me say that the rents there will have gone up by a lot. Some landlords overcharge the electricity and water bills, so there's no protection for the and have nots. If the administration can relax the policies and give these tenants more support, that would be good. Thank you. Mr. Siu, you live in a subdivided flat yourself? Okay, thank you. Thanks for speaking up. Next one, Mr. Lau Ka-shing. Good morning. Hong Kong government in 2011 issued a special one-off payment of $6,000. But over the past 6 years, there have been much voices calling for disbursements of cash. But the Master Students Associations think that actually the scheme could be further optimized And also, more subsidies could be provided to foster the local economy and also development of social enterprises. In public administration, there's this term of, extra effects. So the 6,000 cash handout could be transformed into a scheme of handing out $2,000 depending on the surplus situation. Give out the NU 2,000 to 6,000 coupon to people aged above 18 to help them consume at social or support social enterprises. I think the government can actually distribute public money to all the people above the age of 18 in Hong Kong. Then can also help with the development of social enterprises by giving out the coupons. And it can also mean more support for social enterprises and help the public be more willing to support them. Through consumption coupons, the public can also understand more about the various roles and work done by the social enterprises in helping the underprivileged, so that all the vulnerable groups in Hong Kong can benefit from those enterprises. Ultimately, social enterprises with support of the coupons, their services can be enhanced and their products can also be improved. So that can also creating wealth for the people and also supporting local economy. Therefore, I think the government can consider that and the secretary can discuss it with the relevant people. I think consumption coupons may be a new idea in Hong Kong, yet in Taiwan, over the past decade or so, they've been giving out the government there has been giving out consumption coupons to foster the economy. So in Hong Kong, we can promote such coupons to encourage people to spend at social enterprises. As an executive measure, maybe each enterprise can also, once they've received the coupons, for example, enterprises receiving $100,000 in cash coupons a year, and if they operate well and they can be given additional support, cash support by the government to help them further develop, so the government can use this means to really provide long-term help for low-income groups.
Thanks very much, Mr. Lau, for your proposal for consumption coupon for social enterprises. Well, let's invite Young Democrats, Mr. Yip. Chairman, I am Lim Chi Kin from the Young Democrats. In the budget, there was mention of the relief measures for the grassroots, but for nothing people, they didn't benefit at all. The CCF has launched the one-off living subsidy 3 times, 52,000, 62,000 and 65,000 respectively have been benefited. And this measure cannot fundamentally resolve the problems of the grassroots, but this is a kind of supplement to relieve the burden. We have seen an increase in the number of applicants. The situation is getting worse. The rental for the SDUs is getting higher. The government, faced with the hardship of these people, should bear in mind their difficulties and should not stop the one-off living subsidy. Instead of this, the government should launch other programs for the nothing people so that they can benefit from it. The SLW at that time did emphasize that there would still be the WITS and the LIFA for them. Now, they are 3 separate things altogether. The LIFA will not be eligible, will not be allowed, available to everybody. And many people are denied the LIFA, and there are different eligibility criteria. Now, people may be able to apply for WITS, but at least they have to work 36 hours per week and less than $9,000. For the nothing people, it is hard for them to enjoy the LIFA and WITS to replace the one-off living subsidy. The one-off living subsidy is more liberal, and the application process is far more streamlined. In the community, there are many people who need assistance, and the government is so removed from reality, and the government is saying that there are other subsidies available for them. So the Young Democrats hope that the administration would be more in tune with reality and understand the plight of the people. We urge the administration to launch rent assistance and review the eligibility criteria for PRH. Now, that for those who are on the waiting list for more than 3 years, there should be a regularized rent assistance for them, and that is the way to help these and nothing people. Thank you, Mr. Yip. Now, I'd like to call upon Mr. Wan, Chairman of the budget. We have the extra payment for the CSSA and the OLA and so on, but then nothing people's subsidy has been scrapped. Now this is linked with the rent assistance. Given the insane property market, the rental housing is kind of assistance in itself. If you link the two, and if you say that there is no extra allowance for a rent waiver, and therefore you scrap the one-off living subsidy, then you are widening the gap between the PRH tenants and the SDU tenants. The SDU tenants are ripped off by the owners, and overcharged for their power bill, the rent allowance. You're worried that this would trigger an increase in rental level. Now, this one-off living subsidy is going to be scrapped. According to the administration, they have launched the LIFA and also the WITS. Many people will stand to benefit from this scheme. I'd like to give you some figures here. Earlier, there were deputations that said that the one-off living subsidy benefited 65,000 households. In fact, all these years, 143,000 households benefited. Now, for the LIFA, the government thinks that 200,000 households will stand to benefit. In fact, only 90,000 people will stand to benefit. So, one-off living subsidy, LIFA, WITS, are not duplicated. They don't benefit all the people. There are so many people who are denied these kind of assistance. If the government scrapped the one-off living subsidy for the and nothing people, then you would be compounding the problem. You would be aggravating the social conflicts, and the problems faced by the SDUs cannot be resolved. Now, the number of applicants for LIFA is so low because of the complicated procedures. They have to give so much documentation, but one-off living subsidy is so liberal, and people can stand to benefit easily. The government is taking this away, and many people are falling out of the safety welfare net. The subsidy has gone down well among the public, and this would lessen the burden of the SDU tenants. I mean, it's beyond me why this is taken away. Well, let's swing to the other side. Mr. Ng Kwan Lin. Chairman, thank you. Sorry for being late, Chairman. Now, for this public hearing on and nothing people, I'm sure a lot of us would like to keep the one-off living subsidy for low-income households who are not in PRH and not receiving CSSA. Dr. Law is here with us. On many occasions, I saw Mr. Law, and I told him many times that the problems have not been alleviated for those who are living in the subdivided units. There are 290,000 people who are on the waiting list for PRH. Why is it that at the time when you should plug the gap in the system, the CCF chose to scrap this kind of subsidy, and this is really beyond my understanding. Dr. Lo Chi Kwong said that since there is no rent waiver for the PRH tenants, and therefore the one-off living subsidy has to go. Nobody understands this logic. Why do you make the link between the two? I mean, it's really beyond me. Also, we come here to urge the administration to carry on with the one-off living subsidy for the and-nothing people. We urge the administration to live up to the pledge to let people get PRH in 3 years' time. Now the government fails to honor its pledge, and therefore, for those who are on the waiting list for more than 3 years, there should be some kind of rent assistance. For those who are in the SDU, they will have to wait for 3, 5, 7 years. There is no rental control. Of course, we'd like to bring back rental control. I know that Dr. Law is in favor of this. Until the rental control is in place and the residents are facing the threat, the specter of moving every 6 months, and they have to pay 2 months in deposit. They have to pay for the new furniture, the renovation, and so on. I mean, this is a huge burden for them. The CCF can help the residents who are living in the unauthorized building structures or rooftop structures, who are facing eviction by the buildings department. I know that people who are living in the industrial building will enjoy this kind of subsidy. What about those in SDUs? The CCF, I hope that would give us some statistics. 2 years ago, you said you would disclose the statistics, but you haven't lived up to your pledges. Madam Wong? Chairman, thank you. SDU rent and also overcharging of the utilities are a problem. The tenancy agreement doesn't mention the utilities bill, and this is compounding the burden of the grassroots people. And I think these people are really energy poor. The government doesn't have any legislation to offer protection. They can only rely on the code of the power company. If you lodge a complaint against overcharging, then they would just cut the supply, and the tenants would stand to lose. According to a survey, 90% of the SDU tenants have been ripped off for the power bill, up to $2.80 per kWh. Also, water bill, it can be $20 per cubic meters. In fact, each household would use an average of 92 cubic meters, and it is not 90 cents per cubic meter. Even if you're consuming less than 12 cubic meters, you still have to pay. And the government is not offering assistance to the tenants, those who are living in SDU and petitioned because they don't benefit from it. And utilities bill doesn't enjoy any assistance. Until we have the legislative protection, the government should offer some assistance to those living in SDU and petition cubicles. There should be some assistance for the utilities bill. The CLP did launch a program to offer some assistance to those who are living below the poverty line. I like to say that the one-off living subsidy, or the LIFA, is very, very complicated in the application process, and many don't even know that this exists. The government hasn't done enough publicity in how to expect the tenants to make the application. And what can you do to help those who are mired in poverty? Thank you. All right, Madam Yu. Chairman, government officials, I am working in Kwai Chung. In my day-to-day work, I get in touch with a lot of SDU tenants. I'd like to take this opportunity to say that the tenants are facing loads of difficulties. There are so many of them. We have something like 88,000 households who are living in subdivided units, and the number of people affected stands at 200,000. This is a big community, and the CCF is there to plug the gap in the welfare system and offer assistance to those who are in need. Now, there are so many people who are facing problems with the utilities bills and so on. The CCF has decided to scrap the one-off living subsidy for the and-nothing people. We do have a number of aspirations. We'd like to urge for subsidies for the utilities bill. The residents have been ripped off because of overcharging. The CLP hasn't put up the tariff, but in fact the tenants have seen an increase in their tariffs bill, and they don't really want to turn on the aircon in order to save and skim, and some would even choose to sleep rough on the street in order to save their utilities bill. Now, the one-off living subsidy has been very helpful. It may not be a long-term measure, but in the short term, a couple of $1,000 or tens of thousands of dollars for a 3-person household would be very helpful, and they regard this as a kind of rental assistance, and this is indeed very helpful for the residents. Dr. Law said in the past that he's worried that if the rental assistance would only trigger an increase in the rental level, and this would only benefit the owners. I don't think we have the statistics to show that the one-off living subsidy would only benefit the owners themselves. In the absence of the one-off living subsidy, the tenants are still facing rental hikes. So I hope that in the near future, the CCF should offer some kind of assistance for the and-nothing people before we can achieve the rental assistance.
Thank you. Same logic here. You can change the name, but the needs of and have-nots are very clear. Next one, Mr. Tin Ka-shun. Thank you. There's so many deputations here this morning, electricals speaking out, and also outside. When we came in, we talk about the needs facing the and have-nots. The government has always thought that it has done a lot, thinking that it's offering all sorts of subsidies for them already. But here we want to let you know that once you've removed the special subsidy for and have-nots, they are deprived of all sorts of support. Therefore, the various deputations here have put before us on the table the slogan and the drawing saying that there's nothing left for the and have-nots. So let's chant the slogan here.
N 無人士得條毛 ，N 無津貼不可取消。
好啦，唔該晒。
You must not remove the subsidy for and have-nots. Just a lot of deputations and spokesmen have said that the rent waiver for public rental housing was linked with the removal of the special subsidy for have-nots. Let me remind you, Professor Law, that the one-off subsidy for have-nots can be treated as a rent subsidy. Dr. Law has said that the special subsidy is not a kind of rental subsidy. Why? And why is it linked with rent waiver for public rental housing? I can't really see the logic. So that explains why the rent waiver, the relationship between the rental waiver for public rental housing and the special subsidy. The government is offering all sorts of benefits for families as long as they are poor enough. But now there's more to it. It also depends on whether the applicants for special subsidy are getting other kinds of support already. So you need to apply depending on how poor you are. And also, an additional condition is that whether other people are already getting the benefit. So are you saying that you are providing subsidy as long as there are already others who are enjoying it already? Let's look at it this way. Welfare benefits, are they really intended for those in need, or are they offered to on a basis that they are convenient for the government? Are you really helping the grassroots, really? And now the government has a fiscal surplus of more than $900 billion. So why are you not using part of the money to help the grassroots? I hope that the CCF recognizes that it took the wrong step of abolishing the one-off subsidy. I hope that you can launch other alternatives or relaunch the one-off living subsidy to help those in need. Thank you. I hope that I got it wrong. You're not proposing that changing and have-nots into people with nothing but just a feather. Okay, next one, Mr. Chen Qingyu. Good morning. I am living in an industrial building. Because rents outside are too high, I have no choice but to live in an industrial building. As an have-not person, I'm not getting any rental subsidy. So I don't understand why the subsidy was cut. And I've got no other help. So where can I get the help from? So I have nothing more to add. Well, nothing more to add. I think it sends a clear message here. Anyway, thank you. As a resident in a subdivided flat in an industrial building. You have nothing to say to the officials here? No, I'm speechless. Thank you. Next one, Mr. Wang Wei. Thank you. As subdivided flat tenants, once we knew that the one-off subsidy was scrapped, we're very disappointed, and if we found that there's nothing that's offering help to them. The CCF said that they can apply for the low-income working family allowance, but the application procedures for that are so complicated, and they may not be eligible. And for the special subsidy for have-nots, the application procedures are simpler, and now that that subsidy is gone, what can we do? Poverty actually is hard to be eradicated, but now you're offering the relief measure. So what can the people in need of help do? The government has promised that they can be given public rental housing in 3 years, but the latest news is they have to wait for at least 5 years indeed. So while they're waiting for public rental housing, there's no subsidy and rents are high. How can they afford it? I hope that the administration can reconsider, or CCF can consider regularizing the one-off living subsidy. Well, they're saying that they're not giving it anymore. How can you expect them to regularize it? But anyway, I'll ask the administration to respond. Next one is Mr. Yan Nongting. The rents for subdivided flats now range from 4,000 to 6,000, while the tenants are making about 10,000 alone a month. And the utilities bills make up more than half, and the rents more than half of their monthly income. And the landlords always overcharge, so they are under a lot of economic pressure. And surveys have shown that these tenants are under much mental strain. The families are under much pressure as well. Now that they have to spend so much without the one-off subsidy, even if the tenants can find a cheaper place to stay in, they cannot afford the relocation expenses. So tenants are very worried as they wait for public rental housing, and the living environment is such a source of great pressure to them. I wonder what policy is there to help them. Okay, so suggestion for the provision of relocation subsidy. Next one, Ms. Liu Chong-Mui. Good morning. I am from Kwai Chung district. I'm living in a subdivided flat. As for the CCF, we live in the subdivided flats, and households like them, we make about $10,000 a month. The rents and utilities bills, actually, they cost about 40% of our expenses. Our children are small and I can't work because we have to take care of our children. So can the electoral members fight for more subsidy for people like us so that we can receive some sort of support? It's taken so long for us to wait for public rental housing. I'm not sure what I can say, but please help us, help tenants like us, people living in subdivided flats, to improve our living. Thank you. Yeah, your message is clear. Miss Yu. Next one, Miss Li Fengqing. Thank you. I'm coming from the Coalition for Protection for Subdivided Flat Tenants. I'm speaking about energy subsidy. The average tenant in the subdivided flats are paying $1.4 and up to $2.8 as well, way more than the average household, which is paying $1.4. So for subdivided flats, from the first cubic meters, they are charged up to $14 or above. You may think that it's nothing to do with you because where do you live? Well, you're from the Welfare Bureau and the CCF, Dr. Law, and other government organizations. You may think that it's nothing to do with you. All government departments think that they have nothing to do with it. But over the past 3-4 years, our coalition petitioned at various government departments, Transport and Bureau, Environment Bureau, all sorts of government departments. They say that the utilities expenses have nothing to do with them. And we even took our case to the Small Claims Tribunal to make claims. And recently there was a ruling on a case where the landlord agreed to back down and to offer 80% of the utilities expenses as compensation for the claimant. And the case showed that there's a need for the government to face up to the situation of subdivided flat tenants being overcharged for the utilities. So I think there's a role the CCF can play, that is to fill any loophole. Before any legislation comes into place, CCF can consider offering to subdivided flat tenants utilities subsidy. You can make reference to China Light and Power energy plan or program, which is a kind of subsidy for households, so that you can ease the pressure faced by subdivided flat tenants. Dr. Law, you may think that, well, are we talking about offering direct subsidy for tenants or landlords? But with or without the energy subsidy, the landlords will increase rents and the utility charges anyway. So this sort of energy or utility subsidy is really a vital source of support for tenants. I hope that in the long run there can be legislation to control landlords' charging of expenses. And I hope that before the legislation comes into place, the government can help the tenants so that they will not be worried about additional charges.
無水電津貼乜都冇。
好，唔該晒。
主席。
Thank you, Chairman. Well, life saving straw. I think for the and have not subsidy is the life-saving straw, even though if it's just a one-off provision of $4,000 perhaps a year. Next one is Ms. Yam Chun. Good morning. I'm from the a worker for the Coalition for the Grassroots. Again, on this topic of and have-nots, is an old issue, actually. In the past, our coalition and concern group have met with Dr. Law Chi Kwong on various occasions and reflected to them the demands of the and have-nots, and yet we haven't got any reply. The latest budget suggests that for those receiving CSSA and OH living allowance or disabilities allowance and also low-income working family allowance and also transport incentive subsidy, these people, those recipients, will be given an additional one-off allowance. So for those who are benefiting from those allowances, they are enjoying special favors. But for the and have-nots, we've been given nothing. We can only sit here while other people enjoy extra benefits. I'm not saying that we want to deprive those recipients of their own allowances. What I'm saying is that why is it the and have-nots, given the loophole in welfare policy in such a difficult time, why is it that the and have-nots are given nothing? We're forced to have to bear with high rents and living in subdivided flats in poor environment. If the Welfare Bureau thinks that, or the Housing Bureau thinks that they cannot ease the housing shortage issue in the short term, why can't the Welfare and Labour Bureau consider giving us the one-off subsidy to ease our plight? Just then, various deputations have said that you don't need to call it a rental subsidy. You can call it other names. Doesn't matter. And more than once, we've asked Dr. Law Chi Kwong whether there's any survey that shows or confirms that the rental subsidy will only in the end benefit landlords. Even if the subsidy will in the end benefit landlords, the current situation is that the housing department cannot provide adequate housing for those in need. So given that, we just wait here and wait for our luck, seeing that the and have-nots have got nothing at all as a source of support, and also CCF has such a huge surplus. I think that it is adequately financed to provide extra subsidies or even regularize the one-off subsidy for the and have-nots. By the end of last August, it has got a surplus of more than $100 million. And part of which, more than $100 million, is being held by the Monetary Authority, and part of it is returns from investments. So why can't you use the returns from investments to help the and have-nots?
Mr. Chung, good morning. I'm an nothing person living in a subdivided unit. The one-off subsidy has been scrapped, and we're shifted to the LIFA. But as someone who's working as an odd jobber, and I find it very difficult to produce proof of my working hours in order to qualify. So I think the LIFA eligibility criteria should be lowered so that people like me who are deprived of the one-off living subsidy from the CCF would still be able to make the application. I've also been ripped off by the owners for the electricity bill and the water bill. The owners suggested conciliation or settlement out of court, and my share was paid back by the owners, and the problem is pretty serious. I've been to many departments lodging appeal, not lodging complaints, but we were turned away. The government departments are so ruthless, and I hope that Dr. Law from the CCF would look into his conscience and do something to help the and nothing people Thank you. All right. On this energy poor issue, we're going to have an agenda item for this in mid-2017. All right, Mr. Lau, next. Chairman. I am and Nothing People Concerned Group representative. I am a student. Now, I'm not sure whether you know CCF stands for, in English, is Community Care Fund. This CCF exists to show concerns for the underprivileged. I collected this pamphlet during a public consultation, and I'll read you a short sentence. The purpose of the CCF is to help to offer assistance to those who are in economic difficulties, in particular those who are not in the safety net. Dr. Law, do you think that the End Nothing people has been incorporated into the safety net and therefore they should be denied the subsidy? Second, the CCF is sitting on a huge subsidy. As of August 2016, it is sitting on $19 billion. The one-off living subsidy has been launched 3 times, costing you $3 billion. Is it the case the CCF is running out of money and therefore you scrap the subsidy? Second, now many people are making the link between the subsidy and the LIFA. Now many residents would like to see this subsidy regularized because it's far simpler in its application than the LIFA, which is very, very stringent. Some people may be working enough hours to qualify, but the more they work and the more they make, and therefore they would be disqualified because of the higher pay. Dr. Law, I know that you are working as an associate professor in Hong Kong U. You also have a master's degree from Hong Kong U. I do think the government should be the defender of the administration. You should play the role of a social worker and speak up for the underprivileged people. I have Dr. Law would give us the undertaking that he would come down and meet us in the district and understand their difficulties, have some sort of a dialogue. There should not be any more fake consultation. I attended one of the consultations, and you seem to be fobbing us off during the consultation. I'm sure Dr. Law would say in reply that the scrapping of the one-off living subsidy is not because of the financial resources. It's just the rationale of the scheme. Madam Tam, I'm from the Pt1 Concerned Group. There are 2 types of subsidy. One is cash subsidy. The other one is a non-cash subsidy that a lot of the grassroots people cannot benefit from it. Now, many people are working as odd jobbers, and they experience great difficulties because they cannot produce any steady job records. They cannot apply for the textbooks allowance. They cannot apply for the LIFA. These people are mired in poverty. They are and nothing people. So the government should simplify the procedures to benefit these households. In some families, both the couples are working in order to pay for the living expenses. Now, since both spouses are working, they are not eligible for any textbook allowance or school meal allowance and so on. So I hope that the government would offer half of the subsidies to these people. Now, the LIFA is 50 or 6% of the median household income, and it is higher than the requirement for the one-off living subsidy, very few people would benefit. The procedures are terribly complicated. Many eligible households are not prepared to make an application. And you are required to produce a marriage certificate and also the residential address proof. On one occasion, they produced the ID card of the 11-year-old son, but then they were asked for further information, like a birth certificate. If the government's minded to help the poor, the eligibility criteria should be reduced, and it should be pitched that 75% of the median income. The procedures for applications should be simplified. At the end of the day, the grassroots people would they want to have PRH housing. They have a lot of land, but the land is in the hands of the rich developers, and the queue is getting longer. Instead of 3 years, now it is 4.7. But indeed, you can't get a house in 4.7 years' time. The government should identify land to house these people. And we don't have to struggle with the utilities bill. The government is worried about benefiting the owners by introducing the rent control. Thank you, Madam Tam. All right, I come back to Mr. Lee. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to share with the members my observation over the past couple of months since the one-off living subsidy has been done away with. We heard from the community comments like whether the LIFA would be enough to address the problems of the N-nothing people. In February, we met Mr. Stephen Sui, SLW. He asked us about the line drawn for the LIFA. Now, for the CCF, we heard government's measures regarding those living in private housing. Mrs. Carrie Lam, point 6.7, she said that under the LIFA, she is prepared to propose something for the N-nothing people. Now we have the representatives from the student financial assistance agency. Is the government trying to replace the one-off living subsidy with LIFA? Now I must point out that the targets are different. LIFA, at the previous summit on poverty, the government said that this is intended for the low-income families, and they are living in poverty, and the LIFA is there to help them. Now, for the one-off living subsidy, it is for those not living in PRH and not receiving CSSA, and nobody knows the full name for this subsidy. They just call this a CCF subsidy. What does it reflect? It reflects that in the community, the subsidy is there to help those who are living in atrocious conditions. So these two policies are dealing with two different groups of people. If the government is minded to subsume the living subsidy under the LIFA, I must point out that the government should not mix up the two targets. Myself and my organization do have reservation about this move. There are many people who said that for the LIFA, it is 60% of the median income. For one-off living subsidy, it is at a higher level. So the two cannot be lumped together. If you mix them together, then I think you are misleading the public. The administration should tell us whether they have taken the decision. In fact, they have already taken the decision in this regard. All right, thanks very much, Mr. Lee. Your question is very clear. I'm not sure whether you're going to have an answer. Let's wait and see. Mr. Wong, please. Chairman. We are social workers, and we believe the government should maintain the one-off living subsidy for the and-nothing people. And we have to look at this from a different angle. I'm not sure how the government defines this. Many fellow colleagues already explained that since the government is not offering any rental waiver this year in the budget, therefore we can do away with the one-off living subsidy. Many residents in the community have already pointed out the doubts. Now, this is not a rent subsidy in itself, but why do you make the link with the rent waiver? The government is plowing billions and billions of dollars in the infrastructure, but they are taking away this subsidy. The residents would say that this is of economic value because they're going to spend the money once they've collected it. And I have to question whether the comparison is a legitimate one. I think we have to look at the needs of the grassroots people, and we have to look at justice. The LIFA, it is terribly complicated to make an application. When it comes to the actual operation, the one-off living subsidy and the LIFA are dealing with two different people. The subsidy is really for rental assistance. In many developed countries, when the property market has become a speculative market, then the grassroots people would suffer the most. So that in many jurisdictions they have the rental assistance, but the government is dealing with this through the rental housing. But since the year 2000, the rental housing system has been fraught with problems, and people don't know how long they have to wait before they get on the PRH ladder. And the grassroots people do have diverse needs because of the economic structural change. The tenants are suffering a great deal. So we believe that the one-off living subsidies should be kept on until such time as the government is able to deal with the housing problem. And also there may be housing supply, but a lot of housing supply lies in the luxurious end of the spectrum. So until we can resolve the problem, the subsidy has to be maintained.
Next one, Mr. Lai. I know that the government is considering removing subsidy for the and have not, because they want to link it with rental support for public housing. On April 1st, the actual income threshold for applicants for public housing will be raised, but it seems ridiculous because the latest housing department documents show that those who want to apply for public housing from April 1st, a singleton's income cannot exceed a little more than 10,000, and for three people, you cannot exceed more than 29,000. On that criterion, you can see that those who are given public housing may not be able to afford their overall livelihood. If you are to compare rents for public housing, the rents there are relatively cheap. For say 100 square feet in the private sector, in a place like Pt1, including air conditioning or whether it has windows, the flat of 100 square feet could cost $5,000, whereas in public housing, the same sized flat can cost only $1,000. So for the have-nots, in terms of rents and other expenses, public housing is really needed. So I can't see why the government removed the special subsidy for and have nots, and I don't know what does that have to do with actually rent waivers for public housing. You can see that there are more than 10,000 households living in public subdivided flats, and the government should reconsider offering the one-off living subsidy for the and have not, so that at least those who cannot be given public housing, well, the official claim is that it will take them 4.7 years to get public housing. But actual, a 4-person's family I know, they had to wait for 8 years before they were screened. And that means after the screening, they had to wait for another half a year before they are given public housing. So that's way beyond the 4.7 years promised by the administration. So the government should relaunch special subsidy for NF-Nots and also impose rental control. Thank you, Mr. Lai. Mr. Wong Mo-ping next. For the subsidy for NF-Nots, they actually were intended for people who are not living in public housing. All data show that people living in the private sector are actually in a more difficult situation than those living in public housing. The census department's thematic household surveys show that people who live in private flats spend less on food than those in public housing. That means they have less to spend on food. They spend about 1/3 less than those in public housing. Now the government is scrapping the one-off living subsidy for the and have nots. What is the ground for that? Well, is that because there's the absence of relief measures or rent waiver for public housing tenants? Well, I think that's sort of an executive measure alone to make things look fair, but it has neglected the actual needs or plight of the tenants in subdivided flats. And also there's the rationale that if you are giving away the one-off living subsidy, the landlords will end up increased rents. So the tenants not given any subsidy will be in a worse state. But let me clarify here. The living subsidy is different from the ordinary rental subsidy, because rental subsidy is supposed to be reimbursed and other money is supposed to go to rents. But for living subsidy for NF-Nots, it's a one-off subsidy, and the money could be spent on other areas, not just rents. Even street sweepers, people not paying rents, can also apply for the one-off subsidy. So therefore, it's different from the so-called rental subsidy. So if you assume that in the end it will be the landlords who benefit from the special one-off living subsidy, so the low-income people living in private flats, whenever they get more wages, they would have to use them to pay off their rents. Actually, what we've seen in the front line is that if you were to provide any more relief support for the tenants, then you're saying that will end up benefit other people, not the tenants themselves. But that's ridiculous. There's no sign from any statistics that landlords will, because of the special living subsidy, increase the rents. So there's no particular support ground for the claim that the living subsidy will only benefit the landlords in the end. So hopefully in the short term, the government can relaunch the special subsidy, and also in the long run or medium term, the government should provide regular support for people living in private flats. For example, for those who have been waiting for public housing for a long time, they could be given some sort of livelihood subsidy. And also, as mentioned by some deputations, you might consider for land plan for public housing, they can be used to build some temporary interim housing to ease the plight of the grassroots. Okay, next one is Lee Mei Mei. I'm from the Western District. Residents were forced to vacate their premises. In Western District, the grassroots tenants living there, Western District is an old district and with urban redevelopment and continuous development. Rents there have soared. It's really shocking now how much people have to pay as rents. Our residents have to pay for 6,000 to 7,000 for a subdivided flat, housing the whole family, and there's no area for us to cook. We have to cook in the toilet instead. Everyone got sick because of the poor hygiene. Yet rents are so high and we're stuck in a very small flat. In the Western District, rents have kept rising. Many residents are feeling helpless. So the CCF should provide subsidy for us. Even if it's a small amount, it's better than nothing. The CCF subsidy came about because of the lack of public housing, forcing many residents to wait for even more than 7-8 years for public housing. Some old people have waited for public housing for so long, and they actually already passed away without being given the housing support. And the tenants have to pay for overcharged utilities bills. For us, each of the household member have to pay $50 for utilities every month. The CCF is here, and yet it has scrapped its special subsidy for us. So what sort of help is the government providing for the have-nots? We are not given public housing nor subsidy for rents or utility bills. I think the government is being irresponsible. It says that low-income groups can apply for LIVA, and have-nots can also benefit, but indeed, that's wrong thinking. The application for LIVA actually involves low thresholds. We dare not apply for the special allowance, that is LIVA. And we need to because we have to submit so much proofs for us to get the low-income working family allowance. And we're proposing today instead that the CCF should actually regularize the provision of one-off living subsidy for those not living in public housing. Thank you. Residents from the Western District, thank you. Next one. Ms. Leung Yim Mui. Chairman, good morning. I live in Pt1. My case is that my daughter is a new immigrant, and she's been in Hong Kong for more than 2 years. She's renting a subdivided flat where there's 6 units in the flat that she lives in. When she cooks, well, she has to share the same kitchen with other tenants. For the toilet, she has to share with the other households as well. After she finishes work, she cannot even have a shower from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. in the evening because there are so many people using the toilet, the bathroom. And she's a single parent, and because she doesn't work enough hours, she is not eligible for LIVA. And her son is now receiving education on the mainland. She has to go back and forth between Hong Kong and the mainland. And she's not qualified for public housing either because she has to have lived in Hong Kong for 7 years to be eligible. So I don't know how long she has to wait further before she gets public housing. I just heard so many deputations just then about the cases facing the have-nots. So you've heard the plight of these people. Dr. Law must have heard all of them. I want to say this. As parents, we want our children to have a good living. If our children is not living well, we won't be happy. So I hope that Dr. Law, you can feel our pain. You know how parents like us are feeling. So parents will try our best to help our children, but there's so much we can do. We are getting old. It's not just about my daughter alone. I know that in Pt1, there are other grassroots who are like my daughter, many other grassroots people. So I hope that officials must think of ways to help grassroots people so that their poverty can be eased and they can be given immediate help. For new immigrants in Hong Kong, they are contributing to Hong Kong, and if they're having a good living, it's good for Hong Kong, and also in the end, China benefits. These new immigrants in Hong Kong, they are devoted to contributing. I hope that when my grandchild grows up, he might want to come to live in Hong Kong. Thank you, Ms. Lam. Next one is Ms. Lei Funyong. Good morning. I live in Pt1, in a unit there. Sometimes concrete falls from the roof in my flat and almost killed me. I've been waiting for public housing for 7 years and I've been given nothing. And there are 5 of us living in the same unit. Only my daughter and my husband work, and my husband is already 70 years old and is still working, making a little more than $10,000 plus a month. Rents are high. We have to pay up to $7,000 in rent every month now. I don't know how we can support ourselves. I hope that you can, CCF can provide us with some sort of support. I don't know what to say. My daughter has to work, and when she's working, I will look after her children. And I have to walk up the stairs to 8th floor to come to my flat every day. I don't know how much longer we have to wait before we get public housing. We've been waiting for 7 years already. And I do hope that the have-nots, people like us, will be given subsidy. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Your message is clear, Ms. Lei Funyong. When you talk about, the difficulties you are facing, all I see is really sorrow on your face. Next one, the last deputation today, the 31st deputation. Mr. Ho Chi Chung. Chairman, thank you, Chairman.
嚟到呢度呢，
I feel sad coming here, having listened to so many cases. Poverty alleviation is a pressing issue, but the administration seems to be passing the buck. Dr. Lo Chi-kwang said that there would not be any more one-off living subsidy for the and-nothing people, and he's shifting or directing us to the LWB for the LIFA. Now, there are people who are working as odd jobbers, and there are some people who are not eligible for LIFA. They're turned away. I can't see how this year CCF is plugging the gap. There are so many people who are falling through the gap. They're shifting the goalpost. They don't admit that the one-off living subsidy is, in fact, subsidizing the rental. Now, when we suggested that there should be a rent assistance, and they said that this would only benefit the owners. Now, whatever subsidy you offer, there would be such a situation. We don't really want to get too hung up on the minute details, but we would like to ask for some assistance for the needy people, for the and-nothing people. Over the years, the review reports said that this has been very effective. In 2016, as of December 31st, 65,891 people benefited from this. That's 65,000. That's according to the electrical report. In December 2016, there were only 32,169. applications that have been approved under the LIFA. Where have the 30,000 gone? In 2016, single people applying for this subsidy, 32,000. What's going to happen to these people? They can't even afford the partition cubicles. Are you shoving them to under the flyover and get chased away by the authorities? That they are facing an enormous burden. We have conducted a study. Now, 30% of the residents are managing to stay afloat in 5 years' time, but there will be 60%, and we find that there are more and more people who have to rely on their savings to pay for the rent. So we are suggesting that since Dr. Law doesn't want to take up the responsibility, the LWB should offer something on a regular basis to help these people. Right, I'll be calling upon the administration to respond. And please have a show of hands if you want to put questions. I'd like to call upon Mr. Chen, Donald Chen from the Bureau to respond. And let me say something about the LIFA first, and then I defer to Dr. Law about the CCF. There are 3 points I'd like to make here. First, the purpose of the LIFA, who are the targets for assistance. As we explained before, and the deputation also mentioned that there are some people who may be working very hard, but because of the family situation, they have children and so on, they're still living in poverty. So the purpose of the LIFA is to serve these people, and we are offering cash living allowance for these people. The second area that I heard a lot of comments on is that the criteria are really stringent. Now, we heard a lot of comments here, but basically there are 3 areas: working hours, income, and also 1P household not being able to benefit from it. In our review, we definitely will take these into consideration. There are some concerned groups that have specifically made some proposals regarding the working hours. There can be another tier of 72 hours. The income, there can be another tier of 75%. And for 1P household, they should also be incorporated into the LIFA scheme. All these comments would definitely be taken into account, as I said at the very beginning. For those who are on the allowance and for those who are not on the allowance, we will be collecting their opinions. Once the data come through in May, we will embark on the review. Third, it was said that the procedures are terribly complicated and this is off-putting. Now, as far as it is practicable, we would streamline the procedures. They need to produce a lot of documentation when they first make the application. They have to make the application every 6 months. The second time they make the application, they don't have to submit the information again. We would print the information for the information that will not be changed. We will not require any further documentation. Director might wish to supplement. Or head of Working Family and Student Financial Assistance Agency. Yes, I heard that the procedures are complicated, and in fact, when I have meeting with the frontline colleagues, I would give instruction to them that we would vet the applications in the most efficient and the most speedy manner. First time application and second application, show that the information, the data received from the second application would be more comprehensive than the first one, so the length of time would be shorter. In fact, in November 2015, we announced the program and for application to start in May last year. In fact, since November 2015, we have been employing different means to publicize the scheme. We've gone down to the 18 districts and make available the application forms. And over the weekends, we also responded to requests from the NGOs to go down to the districts and brief the members of the public on this scheme. Between September and December last year, and this is still going on, at the government building lobbies, we designate service or help desk, and also at Lock 4, where people make application for public housing, we do have colleagues introducing the scheme. In January this year, we have identified 4 welfare organizations to help the needy people fill out the application forms. So we are employing different means to get in touch with those who are eligible to make the application. If anybody is experiencing any difficulties, they are welcome to call through the hotline, and we would offer appropriate assistance in a suitable way. Dr. Law? Now, for the N-nothing people statistics and data, we have posted them on the CCF website, the profile of the households and so on. They're all there in the website. There is a mention of rooftop dwellings and unauthorized building works, and they have to move when the Buildings Department enforce the legislation. Now we have the relocation allowance for these people, and we would have a look at this and see whether the allowance can be extended to these other people, but this would take a bit of time. And there is a repeated mention of the one-off living subsidy for lower income households not in PRH and not receiving CSSA. I'm sure there can be a wide variety of interpretations of the scheme and what the scheme is intended for. As I said at the very beginning, when it was designed, it was intended to benefit those who cannot benefit from the government subsidies. It's got nothing to do with the rental in the private market. This is not designed on the basis of the differential between the rental paid in the private sector and in the PRH. Now, the scheme itself is called subsidy for those not in PRH. They may not be living in private housing. They may be street sleepers. They may be boat dwellers, and they may be living in squatter area, and they would be eligible for this. This is not a rent assistance at all. In the government's relief measures, now when we designed the scheme, the government offered 2-month rental waiver for the PRH tenants. So our design had regard to the rent waiving situation. Now that was the idea, the fundamental idea when this was first designed and launched. It's got nothing to do with the level of rent in the private sector market. As I said, this has nothing to do with the LIFA. Just because we have the LIFA doesn't mean that we have to scrap the one-off living subsidy. And by the same token, we launch the subsidy not because of the existence of the LIFA. The two should not be mentioned in the same breath. Of course, some people who benefit from the subsidy can benefit from the LIFA. Say, for instance, the LIFA applicants, some of them are from the PRH units, so the two are not the same at all. For those who are living in undesirable conditions, if we can think of some ways and means to help them, we would be happy to do so. Now, the subsidy scheme has got to do with the relief measures. Because of the changes in the relief measures, we decided to stop the subsidy. We have plenty of time this morning. Members will have the second round. Fernando Cheung, Kwok Ka-ki, Poon Siu Ping, Leung Chi-chung, Leung Yu-chung, Raymond Chen, Leung Kwok-hong, and Roy Kwong, Vice Chairman. Dr. Fernando Cheung, 4 minutes for the Q&A. First round, please. Thank you. Chairman of the CCF, Dr. Lo Chi Kwong, repeatedly said that the one-off living subsidy was launched because under the budget there was the rent waiver for the PRH tenants. So between the rental tenants and the private tenants, there is a gap, and the CCF decided to plug this very gap and launch the one-off living subsidy for the and-nothing people. Now, so much is clear. We also know that for PRH tenants and SDU tenants, squatter huts tenants, and also the homeless, in terms of the level of difficulties, I'm sure that those who are living in non-PRH units would face more hardship than anybody else. The pressure they face from the rental and also the homelessness, the difficulties, the hardship that they face would be really enormous. So my question is, the deputation also mentioned this, what is the original intent of the CCF? It must be there to help relieve the hardship, to relieve the poverty. When the existing policies cannot address this, you should pick up the tab. You should plug the gap there. The budget has done away with the rent waiver. It doesn't mean that these people's needs have fallen away. You may say that this is because of a technical issue, and the subsidy for and-nothing people has to be scrapped because of the change in the budget. Fine, but you still have to offer some assistance to these and-nothing people who are not in PRH and who are not receiving CSSA, and there ought to be some assistance, particularly those single people. They are taking up 30% of the and-nothing people. There ought to be something that has to be done.
So how are you going to plug the hole? And also, shouldn't you not scrap the one-off living subsidy for the time being before you have a new plan? You should implement the goal and mission of CCF at all times. Otherwise, why is it that this living subsidy just came to a halt suddenly? Just as Mr. Lee Shun said, this living subsidy is supposed to be an immediate relief measure, and yet now people are feeling that you are making things difficult for the tenants by removing it. Not at all? Fernando Cheung is very clear about the goal of the subsidy. I think there's no dispute about that. We all agree that among many people living in non-government housing, they are actually facing a plight. And the subsidy program has nothing to do with that, however, in terms of design. understand that, of course, people won't care what the money is intended for as long as they get the money. But this particular program itself serves a particular purpose. If you can think of any way to help this group of people in subdivided flats, I'm willing to consider. At the beginning of the meeting, I told the chairman that over the past year or so, when CCF decided not to launch the program, I heard two types of views. One is about rental subsidy, and the other is about energy subsidy. And I explained why on those two subsidies the CCF find it difficult to really consider them. But Chairman, do you want me to repeat what I said? Better not. But I don't understand why he said that the subsidy for NF-nots cannot ease their financial pressure. So what's the point of having the subsidy? Fernando Zheng, you said that you understood, what I had said many times, so you should have known the reason. That is offsetting, giving away favors. So what's the ground for giving special favors? They are regarded as relief measures, right? One of relief measures. So in the budget, when it gives away favors, giving rental waivers for public housing tenants, they are not intended to ease financial pressure, but only to spend money for the sake of spending it. Okay, next one. Kokaki. Well, thank you, deputations, for coming. But I've never seen a scholar whose logic is like that. I don't see what his logic is. Chairman, of course, I understand that I know we need relief measures, but they are the ones decide when the relief measures will come. If you don't tell me what kind of sickness you have, I won't cure you. So if someone is dying and you say that you have kidney disease, then he will give you help because he can only cure kidney disease. So he's only providing relief measures but not offering any support for energy expenses to others. I don't know what logic you have. Otherwise, you shouldn't have been the chairman, actually. Having heard from officials, secretary, deputy secretary, well, they didn't study social work. They are AOs, and their responsibility is to speak for the government. But, Dr. Law, you study social work? I just heard from some social work graduates that one basic mission of social workers is to help people in need. So now, what about the people who are sitting here? Is it that because they do not meet your rents requirements and so forth? But open your eyes and see what's happening in Hong Kong. 4.7 years for people to wait to get public housing, and very low income threshold. And secondly, they live in subdivided flats. I think most deputations here are living in industrial buildings or on the streets or in subdivided flats. They pay from $4,000 or more. Then in water bills, electricity bills, like landlords, like people like Chairman Paul, ripped off a lot from their rents and other expenses. Well, they may get some wage allowances later on, and then there's also $20 billion earmarked in the budget for recreation, and more billions reserved for so-called innovation and technology. And yet, for people with no votes, honestly, the three candidates, well, one of whom is a good friend of Dr. Law, they have no votes. Well, these people have no votes, deputations here, and that's why they have no bargaining power and they are given the worst treatment. So you're not eligible to get relief measures because tens of billions of dollars were spent elsewhere. Even corporate companies are enjoying free tax status. But if you're poor, you get nothing from the government. Dr. Law, what's your logic? What can we do to provide relief. People who can't get into public housing, who cannot get liver. I don't understand what they are. All those tuition subsidy. You talk about tuition subsidy applicable to elderly people. CCF, what can you do? What do you offer to help these people that we're talking about, Dr. Law? I think I need to reiterate what I said in the beginning. That is the two types of views we received. First is about the giving people living in subdivided flats rental subsidy. I'm sure Legislative members are familiar that over the past decade, whenever Legislative talked about or debated about a rental subsidy, the government stance is that there should not be any rental subsidy. And CCF, as a body of funds set up by the government, we cannot be contrary to the government's policy. As for energy subsidy, deputations just mentioned that often that this could lead to the issue of abuse. I know. Well, as a policy, we need to think about how to improve the situation. But if you are giving a subsidy that would be abused, then I do have adequate grounds to say that, if CCF is to give that sort of subsidy, the abuse will only get worse. Well, Chairman, I don't see the logic, but you can ask in the second round. Next one, Pu Xiuping. Thank you, deputations, for coming this morning. But I found that all the deputations are talking about the same thing. That is the scrapping of the one-off living subsidy by CCF. They found it very unreasonable. CCF itself is a body to plug any loopholes. And people have said that, they have to wait so long for public housing, there's no rental control, and now even a basic subsidy that had helped them in the past has been scrapped. And the government says that there's liver for low-income families, and the government said that there will be only a review of it by the middle of this year. So before the review is done, you have scrapped the living subsidy, making the have-nots so dissatisfied. My question is, now that we have these questions or problems before us, so Dr. Law, having heard the deputations, what do you think? What sorts of remedial measures can there be? And there's also the mention of consumption coupons for social enterprises. So has the CCF looked into that already? Is that suggestion feasible? And would you go down that path as well? Dr. Law? Well, as for the questions asked earlier, I think I repeated many times, so I don't want to be criticized as a recorder, so I'm not going to repeat the answers. As for the consumption coupons for social enterprises, I actually started collecting information already. Online, I just searched about 20 articles. Most of them actually critical. Were critical of the coupons in Taiwan. How come that CCF had never discussed that idea, right? Yes. And also for the government's review, you're saying that the review will be undertaken in the middle of this year. So in the short term, will there be any remedies for the have-nots? I think this question was asked already. So far, we're still here to listen to views, to see what sort of solutions there can be for people with economic needs. But now things have come to a standstill. You're not giving subsidy, and have-nots have such vast needs, and there's no new solution in sight. Pu Xiuping, any follow-up questions? I think there's no point asking further questions. So there's this problem here, and the CCF and the government have to resolve it. Lan Chi-Choi next. Chairman, thank you, deputations. And letting us know about the situation in various districts. I think the latest budget, well, I had hoped that particularly for the NF-nots, there could be some relief measures for them, and yet they were not given any help. The CCF has closed its door. It's closed-door fund in it. So you are scrapping the subsidy for them. And Dr. Law made it clear just then that because the government already has liver and the family allowance could help those people as well. But I think initially we want to help the NF-nots, those who live in subdivided flats or places with expensive rents. Of course, we're not talking about total help, but we are actually giving them relief, at least immediate relief. And yet, the one-off living subsidy has been scrapped, and there are no other relief measures available to that group of people. So I was critical of the budget because of that. So now people want CCF to help, and Dr. Law has closed the door, however. So we need to be clear about concepts here. Hong Kong's housing problem, rents issue in Hong Kong. DAB all along has asked for more rental support. I know the government has reiterated that the rental control does not work. So if that doesn't work, so why don't you give money? Rental subsidy could, because of a subsidy, it could actually ease the burden on people who've seen their rents rise sharply. Properties are so expensive now. I suspect that in the coming year, the rents would further increase. So if that's the case, if you don't give people the subsidy, people would not get the help they need. You can't think that, well, we are giving other forms of allowances and people can use those allowances instead. Doesn't make any difference, like liver. But that's wrong, because you need to look at it from another perspective. You have to look at people's increased expenses. If you want to help particularly this group of people, then you need to find out a way. So I want the administration to respond to what do you think of the rent hikes recently, and how are you going to help that group of people?
代表呢
Well, the issues, you said that the rent assistance will only benefit the owners, and the government doesn't have any policy on rent control. I think this is a circular argument. You care to respond? Chairman, the THB has been of the position that in a tight market, if we offer rent assistance, then all the problems will surface before we see the benefits. I think we're going in a loop. To have the rent assistance, we have to have the rent control. Now for LIFA, the threshold is very high, but the review will not be undertaken until May. I think this is more like a circular argument. We're going round and round in circles. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I'm grateful to all the deputations for being with us and articulating their hardship. Indeed, having listened to them, I feel for them, and I visited some of the subdivided unit tenants, and I understand that they are falling through the gap, and therefore they are here to express their views and solicit our assistance. Indeed, there are many constraints. Let's put a question to Dr. Law. Having listened to the submissions, do you think that they are experiencing any hardship? Do you agree that they're experiencing any hardship, Dr. Law? Indeed, they are living in hardship. But do you think that they deserve any help? If there are any means they can be implemented, I would be only delighted to do so. Do you see the need? Well, he hasn't answered my question. I'm not sure whether they are effective. There may be different points of views. My question is, do you think that there is a need to help them? Well, helping people do need different means. I want effective measures. I'm asking you personally, do you think that they need a helping hand? Dr. Law, helping is not about lip service. We do need effective measures, practical measures. My question is, do you see the need to help them? You don't have to go off to a tangent. Yes, there is a need. You do see the need, don't you? In the CCF, it says that the CCF is there to help those in experience economic financial difficulties. Why don't you help them? What practical difficulties do you have, and for you to decide not to help them? The CCF is serving those who are in financial difficulties and do need assistance. Now, you said that they do need some help. Why doesn't the CCF offer to help them? I think Dr. Law is saying that they are prepared to help, but there have to be some ways. Well, the CCF has to come up with some ways. Well, let me read you some of the schemes that they came up with. All these schemes, many of the schemes were designed by them. They're helping those living in old buildings, and they're helping them with the renovation. Well, it seems that they haven't got the measures. Well, Chairman, you don't have to answer on his behalf. Why no measures? They have to come up with the measures themselves. Why are they introducing obstacles in their own path? Well, I'm not answering on their behalf. The fund itself should not have any constraints. They are there to help those who are in financial difficulties. This is only issue that they have. Now, they have introduced dozens of measures. You don't want me to read them all out, do you? The fund was set up, and all these different schemes were formulated. Now, for those in old buildings who need renovation, you're helping them. Why don't you help these people? Why are you imposing constraints upon yourself? Why do you put yourself into a straitjacket? When the fund was set up, were there any particular condition to not help certain segments of people? You expecting a reply? Well, of course I expect a reply. Why, I wouldn't have asked him otherwise. Dr. Law? Yes, Chairman, we have 36 initiatives. In the coming months, there will be 6 initiatives that will be rolled out. All these measures, I must say, most of them were formulated in light of response and sentiments from the community. We designed on the basis of that. There are some programs that we formulated ourselves. I think some of the measures are formulated through discussion with other people. We will try our best to come up with the measure, but I expect members to help. Yes, he said he would think about it. Why do you restricting yourselves? Why don't you consider this? Why do you imposing all these restrictions upon yourself? So the question is, we have heard all these comments. Are you going to bring these comments back and consider them and introduce measures? Simple as that, Chairman. Yes, consumption coupon for social enterprise. He said he's done some research and he saw these negative comments. Well, if he heard all these needs, they should discuss them and come up with a measure. Simple as that. Why is he not prepared to do it? Does he think that these people don't need any help? Or I don't really want to barge in unnecessarily. I don't understand the logic. Here, the CCF says that they are helping those in financial needs, financial difficulties. They've agreed with this objective. Why don't they help them? Right, you may press him again in the second round. Well, what's the point of asking if he's not answering the question? So the simple question is, will you bring this back and discuss the issues and come up with some measures? Simple as that. Will he do this? Well, I'll be calling upon Mr. Lau to respond in a moment regarding the proposal for a consumption coupon for social enterprises. Mr. Raymond Chen. Thanks, Chairman. I'm grateful to all these deputations who are concerned about the grassroots people, and in particular, I'm grateful to those who are telling us firsthand how they're experiencing, and they come a long way to express their sentiments. They are trying to air their views again, face to face, to the administration. You are really holding fast your principle. I think we may be barking up the wrong tree. And I think we have moved the motion before to ask for end-nothing people subsidy. The pro-establishment members didn't object to that either. Because of the principles cited by Dr. Law and the administration, there doesn't seem to be any room for this. Dr. Law, you must have heard the hardship many times, and that's why while he was listening, he could log on the web to conduct web research, because he has heard all these many times. Now, your design, the original intent, you said the subsidy has got nothing to do with the rent, and then you said that because the budget has scrapped the rent waiver, therefore you don't propose this subsidy. That these people have been waiting for 3-4 years for the PRH units, and they don't enjoy any assistance that the rental tenants are enjoying. Despite the absence of the rent waiver for the PRH, they still need this kind of assistance. And he said that even for boat dwellers or the street sleepers, they are entitled to the one-off living subsidy all the same. And he also said that this will only benefit the owners, the property owners. I must say that whatever subsidy is offered, it will benefit the property owners. Does it mean that you're not going to introduce any measures? Does it mean that you will introduce measures that will not benefit the property owners? Now, the other thing is the overcharging of utilities. The government knows that this is a problem, and they're saying that if they offer more subsidy, they'll be encouraging more overcharging of utilities bills. Now, Dr. Law and government officials, even if there is overcharging of the utilities, it's not for them to enforce the law. But will you be conveying this to the relevant bureaus for something to be done about the situation? All right, Mr. Donald Chen. Yes, about the utilities bills, power and water. We can convey this to the ENB again. In January, in fact, the ENB did give a reply to LegCo. I don't propose to repeat it, but I can convey the message. Mr. Chen. Dr. Law, I don't want you to repeat your arguments. I'm not arguing with you. Is there any room for something to be done, having listened to the hardship? Dr. Law, I've answered some of the questions, but we will consider all these comments, like those who are evicted by the buildings department, those who are living in the north-rise dwellings on the rooftop. We'll consider this. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong and then Mr. Roy Kwong, and thereafter I'll give 3 minutes to Mr. Tenpo Shan, who just arrived, and then we come back to the second round. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, please. Chairman, I understand what Dr. Law has to say. Basically, he's talking about one point in the budget. The relief measures don't include any rent waiver for the PRH tenants, and therefore he cannot offer any subsidy to the end-nothing people because of the absence of any rent waiver for the PRH tenants. My question is, whatever arguments you have, whatever justification you have, if there are people in hardship, why don't you help them? It's just like going to the hospital and the doctor says that, sorry, I don't know what you're suffering from. You got to tell me what you're suffering from before I offer any treatment, and the guy would die. And the guy might say that I'm going to die, prescribe me some paracetamol. And the doctor would say, I don't know what you're suffering from. Pain is part of dying. And if you cannot put up with dying, and you die, then there's the cause of death. And then this is a waste of time, really. The CCF is really a waste of time. I said it at the very beginning. It is there to plug the gaps. That the rate rebate, the tax rebate, you're doing this for the well-off people. There is only one government. Rent or rate and tax rebates are favorable to those who are sufficiently well-off. What logic is this? I mean, why don't you tell the government about this? Simple as that. You're talking to us about logic. I remember in the Ming Dynasty there was an emperor who didn't go to the court, and he would play around with carpentry. Are you the emperor that play around with carpentry with the eunuchs? That's how the Ming Dynasty fell apart. Why did the Ming Dynasty fall apart? They don't even have the census. They don't even have the size of the registered population. You guys are like the emperor who was playing around with carpentry in the court, and they're saying that I don't know how many people there are, and they don't know whether the tax is too harsh. I'm telling you that these people are dying. What measures do you have? I've read all the manifestos. Carrie Lam didn't mention this at all in her manifesto, nor did John Tsang. Only Justice Wu mentioned this in a brief manner.
So we have, like in our possession, $3,000 billion. Your land sales and the property tax paid by large companies. Where do these people get the profits from? From poor people. You're getting more taxes, and yet you're not doing anything. The most effective is to get money from the rich to help the poor. Stop playing with carpentry now. Next one is Roy Kwong. Thank you, Chairman. Gratitude for the deputations who came this morning. And they told us their stories to show to us the problems with the system. I think there's someone who's watching live broadcast. Ling Ling, Yong Yong, Xiu Fai, Yi and Toto. I think they're watching live broadcast of this meeting now. Last week, I actually visited them in the subdivided flat they lived in. They gave me a proposal then. And lately, I've been going to various visits. Daughter-in-law, it's really important for you to have site visits in various districts and see for yourself the kind of help that people need. They need very much relief measures, not bonus. Up to now, I don't understand why at the end, nothing people, have got no replacement for the one-off living subsidy. Children living in subdivided flats now have not enough to eat. What is even sadder is that they even laugh, they even smile at me. They're used to having, a very cramped life, studying and also eating, doing homework on their bed. They understand that the parents would not have any money to buy gifts for them, and yet they're smiling at me. So what's the problem? What's happening in Hong Kong? Okay, if you don't like the one-off living subsidy, you can think of another name to the same kind of support for them. We can't just ignore their plight. They are having such a difficulty making ends meet, and yet they cannot be given public housing. The form for applying for deliver is so difficult to fill in, and some people got their application form returned several times, so they didn't apply again. And they said that, their parents or their husband gave up applying in the end, and so they end up being stuck in poverty. I really can't figure out. So the law, just when you said that I don't want to be a recorder, you're not expected to be a recorder. You are just, just like a machine. No matter how high your intelligence is, you have to have compassion. We have the methods now put before you. I know there can be control over abuse of utilities bills and so forth. That's okay. With the little time left for me, well, last week when I was visiting the children in subdivided flats who are actually watching the broadcast on TV now, let me ask you, daughter-in-law, a simple question. If you do not resume the one-off living subsidy, what can you do to help these people? Anything you want to call it. We have the money, we have the system, so what's lacking now? Please let me know. Daughter-in-law? Honestly, since March last year, when CCR task force convened, the question was raised. That is, what other options are there to help people with financial difficulty? Chairman, as I said at the beginning, and as I just reiterated, there were two types of views we received: rental subsidy and energy subsidy. I'm not going to repeat them again. I just hope that if you have other feasible options, please let us know. We'll try to consider them. But the more we draw on this issue, it's like, we think that we can just keep having meetings. But to children, we are talking about children's childhoods that have been wasted. So can you do something more concrete? Okay, can you just try to regularize some sort of support for them? Well, okay, the old has died, and yet we haven't seen anything new in place of them. Okay, next one, Mr. Temple Shan, I'd like you to speak, and then Lau Ka-shing will respond to the consumption coupon suggestion. And then we have the second round, Fernando Zhang and Uncle Hong have queued up for the second round. So far, I have a motion put before me, but we don't have enough staff members present, so please try to get members to come in. Because we need to deal with the motion before 12:30. Okay, deputation, Mr. Temple-Shan, thank you. Just one sentence here. Is it that we don't see the need for people living in subdivided flats? If you think that these people have needs, what do you do? What can you do to help them? Just then many residents have talked about their plight and the impact of the scrapping of one-off living subsidy on them. You know, subdivided flat tenants are facing all sorts of exploitations. Besides the rents, they are also overcharged for utilities. So you need to think of the plight that they are stuck in. I know that the living subsidy is no long-term solution, but before you have a long-term solution, any form of subsidy, for the grassroots, is really a good relief. Well, we have much discussions today. The government, CCF, without consulting the public and in a rush, abolished the living subsidy. I think that really caught many tenants by surprise. They were angry as well with the decision. As friends of groups which are sympathetic with the grassroots, we think that the scrapping is really unreasonable. So I think the present government, which said that it emphasized the housing issue here, scrapping the subsidy seems to run contrary to the government's stance. Over the past 5 years, the current term of government has not resolved the issue of subdivided flats. The rents are getting higher and higher, making living even harder for people living in those flats. Dr. Law just then said that the one-off living subsidy is related to rent waiver for public housing. But as pointed out by many, we should not equate the one-off living subsidy with special favors given out by the budget, and neither should it be linked to rental waivers for PRH. The Hong Kong territory-wide platform for subdivided flats showed that people living in subdivided flats are having increased financial burden because of rising rents. So when the tenants are facing urgent needs, it's really unreasonable for you to scrap the living subsidy unless you can prove that tenants in subdivided flats are fine, have no financial needs, or that you think that you have adequate measures to help them. Otherwise, you should not have scrapped the living subsidy. The government should also have a comprehensive review of grassroots tenants, subdivided flat tenants, what their needs are, instead of shifting your responsibility. You can't say that deliver can replace the living subsidy because they're totally different. Now, may I ask the alumni of Master Students at Baptist U Association, Mr. Lau Ka-shing. Thank you, Chairman. We've heard a lot from Nothing people today. And there are also some touching points made. I think Dr. Law needs to put out the fire here. I think ours is a long-term solution. It's not something to fight a fire alone, but to enrich social enterprises. Hong Kong is such a highly capitalist society, but how come social enterprises, are not given the support to help them to develop for the long term? And at the same time, we can help the low-income groups. We hope that, I'm speaking on behalf of our alumni association, from a sympathetic point of view, from the perspective of public administration alone, I think a proposal can help the low-income groups while serving other purposes. I personally work for a policy research body under the European Union. I also carry out research on policies on the mainland. I haven't looked very deeply into social enterprises here, but I think that you need to have a creative measure. Just then, Dr. Law just had a quick search online on the failures of consumption coupons in Taiwan. Well, they failed because Taiwan spent actually tens of billions of dollars on the scheme, and yet the GDP only increased by 0.6 or 7 something without really stimulating the economy there, because the purpose of the coupons plan in Taiwan was to stimulate the economy. But here, our proposal for the coupons is more to stimulate the development of social enterprises, also to encourage the enterprises help low-income families, say for women who need to take care of children, who cannot afford to the time to look after children. So maybe enterprises can step in and help provide the kind of help needed by low-income groups. And the coupons can encourage people to spend, and then enterprises will have to hire more hands to support their growing businesses. So more people would like to work or can work for the enterprises. So we're talking about a cycle here, not just giving away money. Just then, you may be asking for CCF to give out money, maybe long hairs, for example, ask for more money to be given away by CCF. But our suggestion for coupons replace the need for begging, but to help the enterprises be strengthened. And let's not just look at the profitable enterprises alone. So for the long term, the coupon suggestion can actually help with the development of the enterprises. Giving away money is easy, but we need to think of a long-term measure to create an ecosystem that can help the low-income groups, to create the right environment here. I think professionals may have heard of the term policy ecosystem. We want to create a cycle to promote a system of help. Well, I thought you were saying that why the 20 articles of the law search for supported the policy. Yeah, in Taiwan, there were a lot of criticisms because the coupons did not stimulate the GDP. But we can enhance the coupons idea, because Taiwanese people were asking for giving away of money. But I believe that the coupons for social enterprises could bring people to the direction of supporting spending on enterprises. Okay, next round, Fernando João, second round. You have 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I've moved a motion. I hope that we have enough people here. I think it's really paradoxical what's happening here. We need to explain to the public the whole logic. Justin Dr. Law, Chairman of CCF, said that the subsidy for nothing is not intended to ease their plight. In its 3 times of disbursements, there were review reports done, and every time the report mentioned that 90% of the beneficiaries agree that the subsidy helped them or helped ease their financial burden. The latest report stated that it helped them cope with rents and utilities expenses. So that's the conclusions of the review report done by CCF itself. And yet, Dr. Law said that's not the goal of the subsidy. So its goal is to offset. And yet, the report did acknowledge that there is the needs among the nothings. And yet there hasn't been any effective solution yet to help them. The rental subsidy proposal, for example, is objected by the government. Therefore, CCF will do nothing. Neither would CCF support energy subsidy because it will only benefit landlords. So without any new plans in sight, even though the nothing people have their needs, because they could not, none of the policy proposals could ease the financial burden. Therefore, the subsidy will be scrapped.
I think that this is the clear position of the CCF. My question for I think it is a waste of time to put questions to Dr. Law again. If I may put this to the LWB, we're going to have the surplus hitting more than $900 billion. And for these people who are not collecting CSSA, they're not living in PRH, they are low-income people, I am sure that you will not turn a blind eye to them. Obviously, the LIFA cannot help 30% of the one-off living subsidy recipients who are single people. So what ideas do you have in mind in the face of such a big population of nothing people? Well, the population is 175,000 people. Other than the CCF, what else can be done by the administration? Chairman. Now, we're not talking about the elderly, the disabled, because we do have programs for them. We are basically dealing with the low-income people. Now, we have introduced the LIFA. Now, members may seem to say that this is not sufficiently assisting these people. The working hours threshold is high, and the single people are not included. In our review, we would consider whether the single people, singletons, should be incorporated, and whether there should be an additional tier for the income requirement, like 76 hours and so on. If members are saying that even if one is contributing 0 hours of working hours, as long as someone is facing a rental burden in the private sector, then they should be incorporated. Then it's another story altogether. Dr. Zheng, I know that you understand the question. My question is, what measures do you have, Mr. Chen? I can't say we have additional measures because we're reviewing the LIFA. After the review, if there is liberalization, if we can benefit the nothing people. But obviously, we do have the working hours threshold, and some of the people will not benefit. We have $900 billion sitting there. We don't know how we should offer help to these people. Is it the position the government takes? Mr. Leung Kwok-hong? In this CE race, Mrs. Carrie Lam said that she's proactively looking at regularizing some of the CCF measures, but she will forget about it very, very soon. John Zhang didn't mention that. Justice Wu didn't mention that. I didn't get the chance to enter the race, and the 300 or so members didn't hear the problem. Now, it doesn't matter what reason it is. If you say that you cannot subsidize the rent or the utilities, then fine. It's just like in the A&E department, it says that they will not help anybody without a medical record, and also the A&E department will not be helping anybody who cannot afford the bill. Can't you have the medical records produced? When these people turn up, you can waive the medical fees. In 1998 and 2004, you removed the rent control. Had it not been for that, the problem would have been alleviated. We resisted that. You steadfastly implemented this measure because of the crashing property market. And the government stopped HOS and reduced PRH production, and also introduced the application list system. No land was put up for tender. No land was released into the market for private market, and you revived the market through the three-pronged measures. In the budget, the main sources of income are the profits tax as well as some land sale proceeds. Unexpectedly high, these three-pronged measures yielded more revenue for the government, but there are many people who are paying a lot of tax since 1998, since 2004 measures, since all these three-pronged measures. The Gini coefficient is really topping the world in Hong Kong. It is the situation that we're contending with. This is how we find ourselves in this situation. Be sensible, be reasonable. Since 1998, 19 years on, a lot has changed in the world. And in 2008, we had the financial tsunami. Many people who deserve to die are making loads of money, and they are raking it in. And these people are earning less and less money. They are struggling with higher and higher rent. That's the result of your policy. The virus, the bacteria, was spread by you, and you're telling us that there is no cure for that. I think it's blindingly obvious. What are the CE candidates doing? And you're telling us that you can't do anything about it. Are you like the eunuchs playing around with the emperor? Mr. Roy Kwong. Speaker is not coming through. So I'll let them answer the question in a minute. I've got nothing to add, Chairman. Dr. Law? I don't think it's appropriate for me to express my personal comments on the policies here. All right, Mr. Kwong. Well, you can't blame Mr. Leung for being so agitated. Hardly ever do we have a chance to talk about the and-nothing people in their presence. There are many who come from the grassroots, and they are helping the grassroots, and this is commanding our respect. It's hard for them to come all the way to Let's Go on a Saturday, and then they're not sure whether it will be producing any fruitful results. The issue is sufficiently clear, and that is the one-off living subsidy cannot be done away with. The ALFA cannot replace the subsidy because of all these hurdles, all the complex procedures, and there are many who are illiterate who cannot fill out the forms. It is a bit of a tall order for them. And also, there is allowance for extracurricular activities for the children, and people have to file all the income, and there are some odd jobbers, and they cannot file all this information. These are people in our midst. We're not running out of money. We're sitting on a lot of money, and we have to help them. It's just that the government hasn't got any ideas, and I think the government is still not really doing anything for them. I feel so disappointed today, Chairman. We started off well. We tried to come up with ways and means. We would like to have a timetable for ideas to be formulated. Now, when you're going to come up with a response, you're not responding to us, you're responding to the grassroots people who don't have a voice. I grew up in housing estate myself. I didn't know what LegCo was all about. Today, I don't know what the government officials are doing. Can you simply give us a timetable, how soon you will be able to respond to their sentiments? All right, and nothing people, they lose, they've lost the one-off living subsidy. The LIFA is not helping them. When will you be able to come up with any answers, any measures? Dr. Law, Chairman. I don't have any ideas about the timetable for me to come up with something that I cannot come up with now. Mr. Kwong, I'd like to hear from the Bureau. A timetable, please. No deadline for today's demands? Yes, please. Deputy Secretary, Chairman for LIFA. In May, we would have collected all the data. The review will take place by end of May or early June, and then we will have a timetable. As I said, I cannot come up with a timetable today. In fact, work is in hand, and the preparatory work has already started. By the middle part of this year, we will conduct a review. We'll bring members up to date. Mr. Kwong, why is it that the LIFA is failing so miserably? When we anticipated the number, we did consider the number of working hours. Now, we thought that 144 hours would be appropriate. Now, why did it not pan out as expected? Now, that's precisely the reason why we are looking at the scheme. Now, we would ask those who are eligible and why they are not making the application. We would collect data like this. For those who are already on the scheme, we would also poll them for their views and ask them whether the procedures are too complicated. Where we can simplify the procedure, we would, and we have. We do have some principles to make sure that this is taxpayers' money, and we have to make sure that we will do what we set out to do. So we have to collect the information. Today, we don't have any specific answer as to why those or some of the eligible people are not making the application. Some of them said that the requirement regarding the working hours and income are too tight. We would have a look at the questionnaire, and when the time is right, we will bring members up to date. All right, let's take a break for 5 minutes. We come back in 5 minutes to deal with the motion.